Hello everyone and welcome back to another tutorial video. In today's tutorial we're going to look at part 3 of how to draw an animate man. So this time, just like in our sort of basic female figure studies, we're going to look now at a side profile. So just like always, start on a light layer, low opacity, so that way your construction lines aren't super dark and are going to get in the way of your line art. If you're doing this traditionally, just draw super lightly so that way you can fix, make corrections, balance, do all that stuff, and it's not going to be visible on the page for your finished product. So, like always, I'm going to try to keep my character the same height as the others. So I'm going to start with a circle shape. But then what I'm going to do, once I have my circle, is I'm going to slightly draw it to the left of the page, like an oval. That's because our skulls are a little bit more like an oval. So from the side, that's where it really shows through. So nothing crazy, just a little bit back there. Now, I kind of need to shrink this down. Again, I'm trying to keep this about the same height as my other characters. So for this now, we will start with our spine line. Now, huge disclaimer, just like always, this is the hardest thing to just get right on your first line. So this spine is going to get a lot of changes, a lot of rebalancing done as we work on the piece and as we're balancing our character. But this is just going to be our first placeholder. So I'm going to start at the neck, kind of come in like this. Then I'm going to slightly sink it in. So this is kind of where our shoulder blade would be. Then I'm going to sink it in, and I guess actually I could also just throw in these lines too. This will help. I'm just used to having to draw the little spine lines like this, so I can kind of just feel it out, but I want to make sure that if you guys are just starting out, you can kind of get some placeholders here. So first, this will be our shoulder line. This will be our hip line, okay? So we're going to bring this in. Then what we can do is pop it back out, kind of here, just below, like if this is the point right in between both of these, we're gonna curve the spine just below that, and then we'll just pop it out like this. And we're not gonna need to use that entire line. We don't want our male character to be super curvy, but we're just gonna have it there as a placeholder. So what we'll do now is we will put in our shoulder circle right here. So the shoulder line on our side profile is going to almost run through the middle of the shoulder circle, and that's because from this angle the collarbone is going to kind of point down a little bit, okay? And then that's going to run into this portion here, our rib cage. Open it up like so. From here, we can map out kind of a super basic face. So, following the front of our circle, oops, I just kind of want to bring a line slightly curved like that down here. Oops. So let's give a super basic nose. And you'll see more in the line art portion, but this kind of is shaped like that almost. So right here where like the brows will be, we just want to poke that out, sink it in a little bit, follow the nose. From there, you can give some lips and our jawline, and the jaw can basically connect pretty much to this middle portion of our head here. And I'll add my ears right on the jaw, like so. Probably bring my nose down a little bit. There we go. So super simple face shape here. From there, I'm going to connect the neck like so, and here's our first correction here. I'm going to bring this in because basically the neck portion here is almost going to be even with where the ribs come out. Like, there's not going to be a ton of space right here on the collarbone. It pretty much just connects right to where the collarbone is. So we want to make sure that the thickness is correct here. We don't want it to be overly thick. So that's why instead of shrinking this portion in, I shrunk this one in. Because this one can be moved and it'll still look correct. But if we move this one back, it's just going to look like he's got a shelf there. And that's not really correct. So we'll pop in a little collar mark. And then from here, again, now this time, like on our female characters, we typically will put this like significant portion here behind the ribs for where our hips will begin. For our male characters, we want them only slightly behind where this would be, because our male characters are not going to be super curvy. So we'll still give him a hip shape here, like so, just kind of using sharp lines right there. And we'll, guess we'll just keep this like so. Just kind of keeping the stomach outside of this hip mark here. And we kind of want a nice sharp angle like so. Just right there for the front of the hips. From there, we can, right at this middle point, just have our legs going pretty much straight down. And then, again, we're going to figure out where the ground is. Say, like, in this area. Our ankle marks, and then somewhere in here. Because we basically want from here to here to be roughly around the same length as this portion right here of our quad. That way, if the legs are bent, the feet end up kind of in this area. So, now what we'll do is we're going to basically follow our hips. Oh, oops, wait a minute. So before I do that, I'll first map out the knees. So don't put your knee joint right here. The knee cap is going to be sitting in front of like the bone and everything there. So the knee little placeholder here will actually be just in front. But the ankle we can put right here, no problem. Okay, so from there, we want the thickest part of our men's legs to be just above the knee. So we'll do that. From here, we can add in super simple glute shape. So again, this character, he's not like super muscular, so I don't need to over exaggerate the glutes here. We just want them to kind of be neutral. We still want to kind of tuck them in just a little bit, and then we can build the hamstrings off of it like so, and just again sink them in to the knee joint here. And all of this will be easier to see once we're in the line art section, but we just don't want to get our male character looking too curvy, basically. So do that. From there, make sure our knee is right, and we can give pretty angled, thick calves here. Like so. We kind of want them to be a little bit sharp, not ultra sharp, because he's not like a bodybuilder, so he doesn't have like super low body fat or anything, but we don't want them to be super soft and rounded like on our female characters, so we just want it to be a little bit sharper. From there, super simple foot placeholders, not a foot tutorial, so I'm just dropping it in basically, like so. From there, we can add in a little chest mark. Now, I'm gonna draw the arm kind of out behind him. Now, be real careful here. If you're trying to just follow along here and do like a, you know, anatomically sound figure for yourself here, be really careful with how far back you push this arm. I'm basically just gonna pop it out to the side here because I want you guys to still be able to see the shape of the spine. Okay, so I could even just not draw the arm, but I figure I'll still draw the arm. I'll just have it pushed off to the side here. So be real careful, because if you're following along here, this might even be a little bit too much. To me, it looks like it shouldn't be, but really be careful. Just look at yourself in a mirror and try to figure out how far you can move your arm back before it starts looking like way unnatural or uncomfortable, because you don't want to make it, you know, anatomically incorrect here. But we should be able to just do it like this and it should be fine. So I'm giving very, I guess his arm's a little too thick. I was gonna say I want to give him a little bit of tuck right here at the elbow joint for his bicep. That way he has some shape. And again, trying not to over exaggerate the overall shapes of this character, since he's not supposed to be super muscular or anything. So just kind of keeping it neutral. Kind of keep the rear part of the arm a little bit thicker in this area, the tricep, and from this angle there's like a short head that runs right here, and the long head's right behind it. This character is not super muscular, so you're not going to see all that definition, but it will still be a little bit thicker there, and then kind of tuck in to the elbow from there. Make sure that this is the way we want it. It's a little too thick, so I'll bring it in a little bit. There we go. Then just make a simple fist, not a hand tutorial either, so we're just going to make it simple. Okay, now from there we can add the tiniest pop of the pec. Again, not trying to exaggerate it because I don't want him to look super muscular. Then right here, kind of where the ribs open up in the front, I'll just add a little bit of definition there. And then I'll add in this line, so just almost, you can almost follow this hip line, maybe just a little bit inside. Have a V shape here, and that will show the overall sort of framing of the core. To do that, we can add in some rib marks because our character is supposed to be a little bit thin. And then I'll just bring this in a little bit, like so. And then, there we go. So again, we don't want to over-exaggerate his curvature, like his glutes or anything. We don't want him to look super ultra thick or anything. So, but this should be pretty much what we want. Make sure before you do the line art that your balancing is right. My character is, like, normally I'd be completely fine with how this turned out, but just for the sake of making him as close to the others as I can, because it's supposed to be the same figure, I'm just going to minusculely enlarge him so that way he's like the same height. So, alright, so I'm going to do the line art now. Again, this is just a figure study, so I'm not worried at all about the quality of my line art, so I'm not going to be focused on line weight nor the like intersecting lines. If you're trying to make like a nice piece here, then make sure you're using lots of layers. If you're doing it digitally, if you're doing it traditionally, you might want to consider using a slightly darker line to do this portion first, and then you trace over that with like a artist pen or a marker, so that way you can establish the actual line you want to trace over rather than trying to get it right the first time going over all the construction line stuff. So we're going to do that. Then from here, I like to just start with the shoulder, so connect that straight into the collar. And then I'll have the tiniest bit, so like you can almost think of it like right in here. This portion is basically the traps. So it's not just going to like pop in and then just be flat. It's going to kind of pop and then poke out slightly where the traps connect and hold everything up. So we'll do that. connect the neck pretty much right to the base of the collarbone. In fact, we could even sink in our collar a little bit more, like so. I have a little bump here for the Adam's apple. This is for the tendons in the neck, so you can add that for some detail. From here, I'll put in the arm with some chest definition. Then I can poke the chest in just a little bit like that. Then my little rib marking. And I'll put in the spine portion here, so I'm not worried about the glute just yet. Just want to put in the spine. Then I'll put in the forearm, the hand. From here, I can put in my abdominal wall, like so. Then I will put in the hip. So, kind of keeping it a little bit sharp, angle just like that. From there, we'll just follow it until it sinks into the knee. Again, thickest part on the male's leg is going to be around there. Then we can pop in our knee. I'm going to keep it a little bit sharp, like so. Again, we want to make our male characters look a little bit more rigid. That makes them look a little more masculine. So it's okay to have sharper, more angular lines rather than trying to keep everything real soft and sleek and like flowing together nicely. We can kind of have them intersecting and stuff, and it'll help exaggerate the hardness of the character. So do that. Again, super simple foot placeholder. And then from here, put in the glutes. And you can still make them a little bit perky. I just try to keep them pretty neutral for our not like super jacked characters here, because they're not going to have big glute muscles. And typically, our character, as you can see, is relatively skinny. And so men typically don't carry a whole lot of body fat around the legs anyways. So since he's skinny like this, his glutes are pretty much only going to be muscle with just a little bit of fat to keep them from just being like super defined. But that pretty much does it. So I'm going to quick take a break, and I'll come back, make sure that my character's balanced, that it looks correct. I'll let you guys know anything that I do correct before we do the final review, but I just want to make sure that this actually is good. And then we'll go over it before we end the video. So I'll be right back. Alright, so I just went over everything. Really the only changes I made is I kind of brought my tricep line a little bit further out. That way his shoulder wasn't so capped looking. It made him look a little too muscular. So I changed that. And then down here, this line was just connected right here. I decided to bring it just in front of the hip line, just because when it's connected like this, it just made him look like really curvy. So I just kind of poked it out a little bit for that little section right there, and that makes it look a little bit better. It makes him look like he's not quite so curvy. And we can even bring down this hip line a little bit, like so. But that pretty much does it. Again, you just want to keep him a little bit more angular. In the legs here, it's okay for the top portion of the hamstrings to be thick, because the hamstrings really just kind of cinch in like that as they get closer to the knee. So this part here is fine. But right here is where the thickest point of the quad is going to be. Okay, it's going to be just above the knee somewhere. We don't want them to be super thick up here, so you just kind of keep it neutral coming down, and then you sink it in. Unlike our female characters, where they kind of start thick at the very top and then sink into the knee. Okay, you could even get a little bit bigger on the calf if you wanted. The sharpness of your kneecap is honestly up to you. It doesn't really matter. I kind of like to keep it a little bit sharper, since it helps sort of push the rigidness of our character. Again, just make sure that your spine line here, your male characters will still have curvature in the spine, because the spine has to be able to bear weight. So it's not going to just be straight up and down. but you don't want to over exaggerate that line. In fact, you could even bring this in just a touch if you wanted, but I think that looks pretty good, so we'll just leave it. But either way, try not to get too curvy. And with the chest, again, keep it nice and flat at the collar, but then just slightly poke it out kind of at the very base, okay? Because the male's chest is going to be shaped kind of more like that, right? From this angle. So, but that should pretty much do it for just our basic anime man tutorial. So hopefully you found these helpful, all 3 parts for drawing your male characters. And I think in our next one we'll look at some more muscular male characters. So if you're trying to make like an action story or an action character, you can kind of push the envelope a little bit more on their muscles. And so hopefully these next tutorials will be helpful for that. But for now, here's just a basic anime man. Hopefully you found it helpful, and I'll see you in the next one.